Hello, this is Don Victor, author of Drawn to Win, host of the podcast Drawn to Win, the director of the Academy of Composition, and the creator of the Core 80 Experience, also known as the See and Grow Rich in Art video course, which you can find out more information at core80.com. This is the Drawn to Win podcast, where I have the incredible privilege to draw artists from around the world into fun and meaningful conversations around art and life, and yes, maybe even a little food. You can hear us each week on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and YouTube. So make sure you subscribe so you always have a seat among friends. Let's get into the show. Kathy, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, where are you located right now?
I'm located in a little town called Pearsondale, which is in an area called Gippsland in Victoria, Australia. I've been here for about 17 years and originally from Northern California.
Yeah, your voice is like a very interesting wine. It's like a mixture, like I can hear the California in you, and then at the same time you've been there long enough to pick up a little bit of the language.
And,
the language.
And everyone over here says I have an accent, so.
Well, yeah, I'm sure you do. So this is going to be kind of interesting to see, depending on what we're talking about, where you go, which part of your, the California or the Aussie part of you comes out. I just said Aussie. I have no idea if that's like a derogatory word in Australia, but you guys are tough. You can handle it.
Yeah.
So what in the world made you, or maybe it was a who, made you get to Australia? Like, why did that
my
occur?
original interest is in working dogs, and I raised, I've had Australian cattle dogs and Australian Kelpies and Border Collies, and that's what landed me over here in the first place. And then I ended up in a relationship which is no longer, and I'm still here. So still have the dogs and still have the sheep and still on the farm.
That's awesome. Huh. And when you were like a little girl, were you all into dogs and sheepdogs?
I've been into sheepdogs and dogs and horses, and ever since I can remember. So it's something that's been ingrained in me forever, and probably will always be that way. So,
what is it about the sheepdog that just stands above all the other dogs too?
It's the intelligence level and the fact that they can work independently and think, and just what they can do for the farmer and for the livestock industry. And you're dealing with an animal that is reasons all the time, and I think sheepdog trialing and becomes an addiction, and everybody that gets involved in it, a lot of people start out with a dog and then they buy sheep to go with the dog and buy property to go with the sheep, and so it just goes from there. So yeah,
I know of a family. I went to school with their daughter, and that's what happened. They had a sheepdog, and then they ended up getting sheep, and then they ended up buying like a nice house with some land on it.
Yep.
and I was like, that's interesting. I have to say, I don't have a dog, but I really do want a dog, and I've always loved the labs, but I've also always loved collies, and I've always thought, man, if I can't have two, then maybe I can have one, right? Like, and figure out how to blend the two. And there's a Oh, what kind of it is? It looks like a collie mix, but it ultimately is like a little sheepdog. And so I've always had this space in my heart for sheepdogs, and I'm like, okay, well maybe it'll be like a little sheepdog that I'll end up getting.
Well, unless you have sheep, don't get a sheepdog because unless they have something to do, they get very destructive and very bored. And unless you can do agility or something that entertains them 24/7, you'll have a monster on your hands. So
Well, that's good to know that.
that's the advice that I give everybody that thinks they're great. So,
Oh, okay. Wow, that's good. That's good. I know one of the relatives have one, and that thing has so much energy. It's insane. Um, but I think out of all of the dogs that our family has, that one is probably by far my favorite. But again, I'm probably like a grandparent where I get to give the kid back, you know?
yeah, well, that's the
uh,
best. That's the best solution.
yeah, like okay, yeah, I'll play with the dog for a little bit. Um, so I wanted to ask you a question about another set of animals that you have had experience with. If anyone clicks through your Facebook page, uh, it's cool that you have a picture with a tiger, but then it's also cool that you have like a whole bunch of pictures with big cats. What's the story behind that?
When I was living in California, I got involved with a halfway house for zoo animals. Unfortunately,
Oh,
in the U.S., there's still this issue of people having exotic animals for pets,
mm-hmm.
and they forget that they grow up. And when they grow up, they become difficult to handle and they become dangerous, and they don't know what to do with them. And often there's no place for them in a zoo at that particular moment in time. And this facility, which was in La Honda, California, was a compound that took these animals in while they were waiting for places in zoos. And during their spell there, the people that worked with them used to take them around to schools and colleges and give educational talks on a particular animal. And there was most of the big cats in the compound, and wolves and bears and chimpanzees and orangutans and servals and mountain lions and leopards and jaguars. And I worked there for 2 years and handled cats. And they lost their funding from the government and the state and ended up closing down. And that's when I stopped working there. But it was probably one of the most amazing experiences of my lifetime. And I had spent some time in Kenya and Tanzania prior to that. And this was just the icing on the cake. And to be able to learn the body language of them and to be
Hmm.
around them. And it wasn't without its moments and it
Hmm.
wasn't without danger, but it set a tone for my understanding animal behavior and body language of animals of all sorts. And yeah, it was an amazing experience, just amazing, and something that stuck with me for the rest of my life. So
Here's a
that's the
really
story
weird
behind
question.
that.
I'm going to ask you a very strange question. And maybe it won't be strange. But being a woman around such powerful animals, uh, like felines, right? Did that have some kind of impact on you as a woman?
um, I never really gave it much thought. Um, I've always done I think I have a low fear factor when it comes to animals. The only animal that I'm terrified of is snakes, and I'm living in the wrong place for that. So, but I've done everything from gallop horses on the racetrack to, work with cats. And I've never given it a second thought that being a woman was any different. I actually think sometimes women have a little bit more empathy and sixth sense when it comes to reading animals than men, because they go in with a different approach.
Mm-hmm.
And I really never gave it any thought. It was definitely an unusual thing to be doing, but I think I've spent most of my life doing unusual things, so it's it's never really crossed my mind, to tell you the truth.
It's interesting because when I look at animals, like say like a horse, I remember I used to wonder why wealthy people bought horses. And I guess on the flip side, you have poor people who have horses too. But and I once worked in an art gallery, and the owner of the art gallery was a very wealthy guy, and he was talking about the different classes that he was part of, and one of the things that he started getting into was polo, right? Like, and I was like, well, why is this guy like into polo? Like, what is it about polo? And and then I thought, like, whoa, it makes total sense, because here's this guy riding on a horse at top speed, right? And with one hand, you have to be able to control this enormous beast, where he was telling me how the horses will bite each other and bite the players, and they run into each other. And you could fall down and get hurt really, really bad, but you have to be in such control and self-aware to control this animal, or at least to become somehow a partner with this animal. And then on the other hand, being aware of all of the energy and the people and other stuff that's going around. And then also being able to be so focused that you can then with the other hand swing this stick and hit this little tiny ball, right? And so I'm looking at the different kinds of, one might call consciousnesses that are going on, ideas that have to be managed. And I was like, wow, I can totally understand why someone at a high level of, let's say, production and activity would find that to be attractive, because that's what he's doing, as he's project managing all of these different projects in different states and even countries and things like that. And so I look at animals and I say, well, when I look at a horse, I see power, I see grace. When I think of those big cats, I see something very similar, but in a different way. And so,
Well, it's not about power controlling them, and I think you hit it right on the head with self-awareness. And it's all about body language, and it's all about reading their body language. And if it came to a showdown between a human and one of these animals, there's no way a human could win, because we don't have the physical strength. So it's all in how you project yourself and how you respond to what they're sending you. And some people can do it naturally. Other people never learn it. And I see it all the time because I teach people how to work their dogs on sheep. And some people are natural. Some people just don't have a clue. They just can't read the stock. They can't read the dog. And it was the same with the cats or horses. You have to be able to read what's going on. And your body strength will never compete with theirs. So it's all mental. And, it's, some people are very good at it and some people are hopeless. And those people that are hopeless often want to be good at it, and they just never can get there. So it's a whole different aspect of something, and a lot of it's things that you can't teach people. You either have it or you don't.
When working with the animals, be it the cats or the dogs, and you're reading their body language, because you mentioned that several times. Do you feel that when you're looking at the body language and the way that you respond to it, that's so you're not actually trying to use force or overpower an animal in that sense, but you're actually communicating with them?
Oh, of course. And just a typical example, I'll give you a quick example.
Mm-hmm.
If you're sitting there with a big cat and it's laying in front of you and it reaches out with its paw and smacks your foot or your leg,
Mm-hmm.
and as not aggressive, but as play.
Mm-hmm.
Well, most people's response would be to pull back from them, to move your leg back away from them. Well, what that does, that's the complete opposite of what you do, because that immediately sets you up as prey.
Mm-hmm.
You are moving away from them. You're showing them that you're running from them. So you have to move forward toward them. So you don't take a step back, you take a step toward them. And so you're going against your natural instincts to flee, and you're becoming the aggressor. It's very subtle, and it's nothing dramatic, but that simple language of moving toward that animal shows them that you're not running from them. So given most people would panic, they'd move away, they'd pull their arm back or their leg back, and that's exactly what you don't do. So that's just one example of how body language can trigger a reaction on their part one way or the other. Works
That's
with
awesome.
dogs too. Yeah.
I know years ago I was studying about flirting and attraction and things like that, and I read in this article the number one reason why men fail with women, and they do it within like the first couple seconds, is that when they see a woman and she looks back, they drop their eyes, and by then putting themselves in that submitted or submissive position of dropping the eyes, they now basically forfeit that place. And it's just very strange, but it's basically exactly what you're saying with the animal, where you, you're actually breaking the connection of the potential that of that connection, right? And um and and I find this very interesting, this conversation, and I wish we had more time to explore it, because one of the when I'm working with my students, one of the key things, right, that we focus on is storytelling, like bringing concepts out. And one of the tricks that I use to have them do that is to study their body language, because the body will automatically like communicate things in a way, um, and that if you can actually hack it and see it, and you can transcribe it into your work, it'll solve so many problems in your art if you can learn how to translate um, body language into your image. And so the fact that you're talking a lot about this, uh, it, I'm like, okay, this is cool. Like this is intriguing me. Um, so let me ask you, with your work, because you draw a lot of dogs, and I guess specifically the sheepdog. Um, what's one of the types of body languages that you like to incorporate into um, when you're doing it, an image of a full body sheepdog? What's one of the favorite positions or body
Well,
languages
I
that you
hate
like to use?
standard pet portraits. I just hate them. I'm
Okay.
just so anti the common looking down on the dog in a distorted position and, drawing from photographs. And I do very few commissions because most of the time, unless I know that dog, unless I've had some personal connection with that dog and can watch it and photograph it in many positions or have time to study it, I'm not going to be able to bring out in my drawing any of the true personality of that animal. So whether it, in a sheepdog, each dog has their unique characteristics, and you have to capture something that is unique to that animal and something that says that's that dog. And copying and tracing a portrait from a photograph doesn't do that. And there's also, right now I do a lot of dogs because that's what my life is about, these dogs and keeping these dogs. But I have always liked to draw things that I'm familiar with on a personal basis. I don't feel comfortable doing animals that I haven't had a personal connection with. So every animal that I've drawn, I've had a personal connection or contact with. Doesn't matter which one it is. I will never just look at a photograph and choose to draw that from a photograph without having personally experienced that particular animal.
Do you desire to make every painting have deeper meaning, tell a greater story, and be better than your last painting? Well, let me recommend a strategy to achieve just that. I recommend every artist take time to study the great master artists and illustrators and how they composed an image. Uncover their secret design formulas that makes their artwork successful. Now, if you want a little help doing that, I'll direct you to an incredible free resource at artdesignworkbook.com. That's right, I created a 177-page workbook for artists with lessons and drills that will teach you how to see the secret design formulas by master artists and illustrators. So go to artdesignworkbook.com and download your free art design workbook right now.
It's a real vague question about which position, because there is no set position. It just depends on the animal and the dog and how they come across and what's typical for that dog. What's typical for one dog may not be typical for another dog. I can talk a little bit about why I hate tracing, and because I put artists in parentheses, trace these photographs, they have no concept of anatomy, what's under the skin. They often trace in mistakes. I've seen beautifully rendered portraits of dogs with too many toes or the teeth in the wrong position. And I just know that they've been traced because they put something that they imagine in the photograph is there, but it's not really there. So they haven't studied them and they haven't looked at what's underneath. I freak a lot of people out because in my studio I have a collection of skulls, animal skulls. And those skulls tell me what is underneath the skin of that animal. And I have a very good artist friend by the name of Peter Trussler, who's a wonderful artist here in Australia, who does take skulls of dinosaurs and prehistoric animals and puts the skin on them. And he's written several books about it. And he's been a bit of a mentor to me since I've been here. And we've discussed this thing about knowing what's underneath the skin of an animal many, many times. And I see so many errors and so many mistakes made in just the general anatomy of people doing animals who aren't familiar with what's actually there. So, yeah, I object to tracing. I don't think an artist learns anything by tracing. I don't think they can explore what they're capable of by tracing. And I don't think that they learn anything about the correct anatomy of an animal. If you're going to do abstractism, do abstractism. If you're going to do realism, it needs to be realism. It can't be realism with confirmation faults. You understand what I'm saying? It has to be correct realism. So, if you want to do a dog and you want to do it in an abstract manner, that's fine, but don't attempt to do a dog portrait or a portrait of some animal and do it as realistically as possible and then have too many toes, or, the leg attached wrong, or the stifle joints are wrong, or the cannon bones are too long in a horse, or all of those things that show up when I look at someone's painting. They show up glaringly to me. It's like a red flag. I can't even stop looking at it. So other people don't notice it, but I do. I mean, it's the first thing that I can see. And it stands out horribly. And I always know that somebody doesn't have a clue. They've just looked at a nice photograph and thought, oh, I'll paint that now. So
that's interesting. I had a dear friend, well, not had, I still have, he's still here, from Bulgaria. And years ago, when I met him in college, we were going through and we were looking at this painting and from this girl, and he basically said something very similar to what you're saying. He was like, she has no clue of the anatomy. And I was like, what are you talking about, man? And he pointed it out. He's like, look at the hand. It's like, if you look through it, it's like, it was like the bone structure was not even real. It was like, rubber, but no bone, and the other parts of the image was nice, but you could tell like she totally lacked confidence in the feet and the hands, which a lot of artists struggle with. But and then and so what you're saying, I've heard other artists say, and it's interesting because when and you see something and it just literally ruins the entire experience. And it kind of sucks sometimes knowing.
Well, they can be beautifully rendered, and the technique can be beautiful.
Of course.
The technique can be wonderful. But if there's a glaring fault that stands out, then the technique to me means nothing anymore. And I have a print by a very, very well-known wildlife artist. And every time I look at this print, I found out since that he's a projectionist, which means they project an image and trace it. And I know that was done, and the jaw structure on this particular animal is impossible. It can't be. It's impossible to be that way. And everyone looks at this print and says, oh my God, it's just beautiful. It's marvelous. And I can't look at it anymore. And I've met this man and I respect him dearly, but I can't look at this print.
So, that's what I'm not understanding. It's like when you project it or you're tracing the photo, how do you get it wrong?
Well, because photos distort, and photos aren't always clear. And people imagine that an animal has, 6 toes when it only has 5, and they'll add an extra toe because that line in the photo they think is a toe. Or if the animal is, it's been a fad for a while for people to take photos of their pets looking down on them. So you get this distorted image of a dog sitting there. And I hate those because I find them really distorted, and you can tell it's traced from a photograph and that
Mm-hmm.
was done, strictly from that. So what they're tracing is what's in that photo, and photos do lie sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Photos don't project what's actually there. So those things show up in their drawing
Yeah.
because they're doing it exactly what's in that photo.
Yeah.
And it often isn't what's correct. And
You're right.
and it's a terrible pet peeve with me. And I've had many discussions, and there's many so-called artists think it's fine to trace, and I just think I think you're limiting yourself, and I also think it's dishonest. I think that when people buy a work from you, they want to know that it's your work and you've spent the hours and the time. And I think if a lot of people knew that a lot of artists traced images and then painted in that image, I think they'd be pretty disappointed. And so, of course, with my work, it extends it out time-wise to
Mm-hmm.
take forever. I mean, I've worked on some pieces like the cattle that I did recently, or the tiger piece. Those took months to do in colored pencil, months. And, because I had to draw them first
Mm-hmm.
and do all that correctly. And, I probably could have saved a month and a half's worth of work if I just traced the photograph. But then I couldn't, it wouldn't be true to myself, and I couldn't live with that image putting it out there. So I think it has to do with your own perception of what you're capable of as well. And I think that some people, I think, are cheating themselves. They say it's a time factor, and they need to make money, so they trace. Well, but I think they need to be more realistic and more honest in what they're doing. So
That's awesome. I got your back, girl. I got your back.
that's my little pet peeve and my rant for the day.
I feel you on it. I feel you on it. It's and I think, for each artist it's a little bit different because I think a big reason it's different is because of how you, or what I should say, what you define as your art. And um and so if it's the authenticity of the process, from beginning to end, and being, having uh your hand throughout the entire process, spending time with the animal, like in your case, um, then to me it almost sounds like the art is the entire process. Um, and where some people maybe, well, their art may be actually in their medium, and so they're just trying to get to that place where they can actually, paint it or whatever, and do their thing within their medium. Um, and so yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Um, it's a strange thing because I hate copying, because I think ultimately, it's not a work of art because you're not being an artist. You're just copying, and so therefore whatever the photo in a sense is the artist, and it's just dictating to you what to do. Um, and if you're going to produce a work of art, then you want it to be um, something authentic, and that comes out of you, and your perspective, or on that subject or that situation or whatever. Um,
well, I think a lot of artists are buying photos off of these free photo sites too, and they use those photos, and a lot of them run into copyright issues, and then
mm-hmm.
you see different artists doing the same photo over and over again, and to me that's just abhorrent. I mean, I would, I cannot see spending months on a piece done from a photograph that somebody else took that 5 other artists are going to render. I mean, what's the point? It doesn't. What is that about? Is that about them actually understanding what they're doing, or just applying the medium on the paper and hoping for 300 likes on Facebook? I hate to be cynical, but
no, you're telling the truth. But on the other hand, it depends on where they're at and what their needs are.
Yeah, and if you want to, well, I just feel that if you get stuck in that rut, then you're not going to grow. And if you take your own photos, you take the time to sit out there and study and take photos and look at them and take a series of photos, and which is why I rarely do commissions for people, because I won't take any photos that anybody else has done. I made an exception with the last piece I did that's off to Wales, because the fellow that owns the dog is a dear friend of mine, and that was one of the only photos he had available, so I made an exception. But normally I've got to be the one that takes the photos. I've got to be the one that sits down. And I must admit, I have a couple of very, very good friends that are brilliant wildlife photographers who will send me a series of photos of animals that I can't get to, that I'm familiar with, like the tigers in the wild, or other animals that are in the wild. And they've granted me permission to use their series of photos. And I will work from that. But it's with animals that I have personal knowledge of and have sat with and have had hands-on with and know. So there's a difference there, and it's not me going through a computer and picking out, I think I will do that photo because I like it. So I'm gonna do an artistic rendering of it exactly as I can, as close as I can. And I just think that fails them in the long run, because I don't think that they're learning, and I don't think they're advancing. I think they're only copying. And unless you extend yourself in some way, you'll never stand out. You'll never, and it's a hard road to go. It's being an artist is a really difficult thing. And in many ways, because people don't appreciate the time that's put in, and they think that you should do work for nothing, and on and on and on, all the excuses, on and on. And there's very few artists that I know that are able to do it for a living, simply because of the number of artists that are around. I used to have a much easier time. I used to do commercial illustration years ago, and I sold to galleries that were in the States. And then when I moved here, I let my art go for a while, and then I got back into it pretty heavy. But things have changed since that time, and I feel that with digital photography and computers and all that, a lot of people have become so-called artists that aren't artists, really. They're copyists. And so it's changed, and everyone wants to be an artist, and everybody, vies for the latest pet portrait and charges $50 to $200, and they drag down the market, and they don't value their work. And so there's a whole lot of things that have made art a bit difficult to survive on anymore. And so I don't depend on it. I can't at this point. I get great satisfaction from sitting down and doing a piece that I want to do, and entering a lot of these online contests and competing with people internationally around the world, and placing and winning against them, I find is great satisfaction.
So you're not
And
producing the artwork to make money per
no,
se.
not now. No, not now.
No, that's a
I
great
can't.
place to be.
It's. I think I would like to be doing it full time, but it's not a realistic expectation because you have to get involved with galleries, which take a tremendous commission. I don't know what they're taking in other parts of the world, but over here it's sometimes up to 40%, and you've got to pay for framing and everything else. And it's just not realistic. It's just, it's a lot of slog for nothing, and being responsible for nothing. Like, for an example, there's a art contest for working dogs with the Casterton Kelpie Festival every year, and the prize is $2,000. And I have had them nag at me for 15 years as to why I don't enter it. And the reason is, and it's an acquisitive prize, so they take the painting for $2,000. And I said, because I'm not going to spend 6 months working on a piece, frame it for another $300 to $400, ship it over to you for another $250, and get $2,000 first prize, and you keep the artwork. I said, that doesn't make sense. I don't get satisfaction out of doing that. If I'm going to do that, I'll keep the artwork myself, have prints made of it, and sell prints. So there's this a lot of unrealistic expectations from galleries and places like that, and so I think it's really hard to make a living. And I was just speaking to a good friend in the UK. He's one of the most brilliant wildlife artists around nowadays. Amazing work, a fellow by the name of Steve Burgess, and his work is phenomenal. It's just incredible, but he has a rough go of making a living at it, and runs into the same problems that I do with people not paying for prints and on and on and on. And so I think it's something that only the very elite at the top can really make it and really do well, but the rest of us poor people have to have another occupation. And unfortunately, mine right now is farming, which isn't a money maker either. So, I'm a masochist, I guess.
Well, that's kind of funny. Yeah, well, it's look on the bright side of life. Every decision has a pro and a con, and the pro here is that you at least get to do what you would consider authentic work and put the time and the quality into it. And that's, like you said, satisfaction in there, and then also entering these contests and that allow you to win and get the recognition, and that's satisfying. And a lot of artists would love to make a living doing their art. I know years ago I had to come to a conclusion where I love capitalism, but I struggled for many years, like trying to figure out this thing about the art and making money from it. And I just came to a place of peace where I said, whoever said that I had to make money from my art?
Well, I use it as a almost a meditation and a point to chill out, because I work very hard during the day physically, and I'm on the go nonstop. And so when I get in the evening, my relaxation is to go in my studio and work for 2 to 3 hours until I fall asleep on the easel. But that puts my head in a different place. It takes me away from all the problems on the farm, or the dogs barking during the day, or the sheep demanding things, or people stopping by, and it's something that's mine alone.
Mm-hmm.
It's what I can do, and I don't want, at this point in my life, I don't want the pressure of having to come up with 20 pieces for a show in a gallery on a deadline. I don't want that because I feel that it will change what I'm doing. And maybe someday I'll do that, but not now. So,
and there's other options. You can do your own show on your own timetable, right? Like take 2 years, work on 20 pieces.
right.
And then rent a spot for a weekend and do your own show. And if you sell the paintings, well, then you get 100% commission, right?
Exactly. And I don't have to give them 40%.
Exactly. Kathy, I know it's time to go feed the sheep here in a minute. But before you go feed the sheep, I have to ask you, if the sheep were going to feed you in a few minutes, what
what I would want.
Yes.
I'm desperately missing good Tex-Mex or Mexican food over here because you can't buy the ingredients, and there's no good Mexican restaurants near me. So, yeah.
It's been how long? 17 years since you've had that. Wow.
Well, I've had it when I've gone back to visit every once in a while, but
okay.
It's not something that you can go out and let's go have a good Mexican meal. I finally got some stuff to make authentic margaritas, so
that works. Liquid Mexican food. Margarita, that's awesome.
Anyway, but if you want to continue this at another time, we can do that too. So
sure. Well, how can people connect with you?
Best thing is through my email address or my Facebook page, and I think I sent you the link for that.
Yep.
It's Art by Kathy Christian is the Facebook page, so that's the best way.
Awesome. So I'll go ahead and put those links in the show notes so that people can click over and check out your stuff.
Okay.
Kathy, it was awesome talking to you. And yeah. So on that note, we'll go back. No, just joking.
Well, they're agitating out there now. I can hear them.
So before you go, I have to ask, because this is just fascinating to me. Do you have a call that you send out that they come to you with?
No, they just know what time it is.
Oh, okay.
It's amazing that I don't even have to wear a watch because between the dogs and the sheep, they know exactly what the hour of the day is.
That's cool. Yeah,
it's not so cool when it's early in the morning, though.
And they're like, feed me.
Yeah, I want to get up now. You can't sleep in.
Nice.
Well,
cool.
It does have its disadvantages.
Well, you have great subjects to paint then, or to color pencil then.
Yeah.
All right, Kathy, enjoy, and we'll talk another time again. All right.
Okay, it was good chatting.
Yep. Be well. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Do you desire to make every painting have deeper meaning, tell a greater story, and be better than your last painting? Well, let me recommend a strategy to achieve just that. I recommend every artist take time to study the great master artists and illustrators and how they composed an image. Uncover their secret design formulas that makes their artwork successful. Now, if you want a little help doing that, I'll direct you to an incredible free resource at artdesignworkbook.com. That's right, I created a 177-page workbook for artists with lessons and drills that will teach you how to see the secret design formulas by master artists and illustrators. So go to artdesignworkbook.com and download your free art design workbook right now.